Hi, thank you for listening to this episode of the Following Films podcast, a movie podcast that takes you on a weekly journey into the world of cinema and the minds of the talented individuals who shape it. I'm your host, Chris Maynard, and today we're joined by Ahsoka DP, Eric Steelberg. Ahsoka is a television miniseries created and written by Dave Filoni for Disney+. It's part of the Star Wars franchise, and a spin-off from the series The Mandalorian, taking place in the same time frame as that series and its other interconnected spin-offs after the events of Return of the Jedi, while also serving as a continuation of the animated series Star Wars Rebels. The series follows Ahsoka Tano as she investigates an emerging threat to the galaxy following the fall of the Empire. But before we dive into our conversation with Eric, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Bookman's. Bookman's is your go-to independent bookstore, where you can find an extensive selection of books, movies, music, and more. They truly believe in the power of storytelling and in the magic of the cinematic arts. So if you're looking to expand your film collection, be sure to visit your nearest Bookman's. There's always something truly wonderful to discover. Have you followed the Following Films podcast on Spotify? If you have, well, thank you. If you haven't, head on over to Spotify, search for Following Films, and give us a follow. It really does help the show. Ahsoka is currently streaming on Disney+. Hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks. Yeah, no, and thank you for taking the time to do this today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
So this has to be, I'm assuming, because we're about the same age. I'm 47. Star Wars is something that's just a part of my DNA. It's literally my first memory is going to see Star Wars. I saw it at a double feature with the Muppet movie when I was like 3 years old or something. It's the earliest memory I have. What is it for you? What does your history go back to with Star Wars?
I'm a child of Star Wars, 77. My mom likes to tell the story how I was 7 weeks old, asleep in the back of a car while they watched it at a drive-in. The week it came out. So that, it's, look, I was there. I was there at the beginning. I can't remember it, but, and then, my father was very much into home video and Laserdiscs and Betamax. When that came out, he was kind of a home audio video tech guy. And so he jumped into home video in a big way. And Star Wars was some of the early home, I'm talking like Betamax. And then Laserdiscs of Star Wars. And I watched what was available, and that was what was available. And I watched a lot of it. It was like Disney movies, like the Disney live action movies from the 60s, Star Wars, Superman. And like, that was kind of it. And that's what I just kind of kept watching. And Star Wars in particular, I was obsessed with, because everything else was all based in the real world. And then there was Star Wars, which took you to other worlds, but somehow still looked and felt just as real. Like my little kid brain just couldn't quite grasp it, and I was so enthralled by it. It was great. So it's just something that's always stayed with me. And Star Wars, it fueled my interest in movies. It was a thing that got me interested in movies first. It's the thing that kind of lit the fuse, and my love of movies grew from that, and eventually led to me falling in love with cinematography, which, now I've got a career. So but it's there. It's always been there. It's always been the background, the seed of kind of everything I've ever done. Professionally and creatively. And so having the opportunity to, work on something Star Wars is like, you can't even, it's indescribable. It's a lot of fun, and then incredibly stressful, because like, wait a minute, this is so cool, but wait a minute, I don't want to be the one to screw this up. I don't want this responsibility. Do I really want to do this? Can I just be there and just watch? Honestly, I think half the reason I do it is just so I could be on set watching, and just forget that I'm actually have a responsibility to actually have a job on it, but actually just watching. Even on the days that I didn't have one of my episodes actually filming and I was prepping, I would still go to set and watch, the other crew shoot their episodes, because
why wouldn't you?
That's cool.
I would go work craft. I wouldn't care. I would do anything on a Star Wars set. Just have the chance to sit in and see it. Of course. Yeah. I totally get that. And it's funny how I honestly had never connected that to the home video aspect of it, which my dad was very similar to that, where it was before Laserdisc, there's these things called video discs, where it was actually, it was on records, and we had those, and Star Wars was on those, and then it was Betamax, and then Laserdisc, and it was the must-own format. It was whenever there was a new format, how long would it be before I got Star Wars?
And it always showcased everything, all the films really well. And in fact, my memory isn't what it used to be, but I seem to feel like the New Hope Laserdisc was the first time I'd ever seen a movie in widescreen.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because they had the special widescreen box set of those that was put out.
Yeah, and that was later on, like in Laserdisc, so that would have been like later 80s, maybe like 86, 87. But I remember my dad got that. And I thought something's wrong with the TV. And that was broken because I was like, I only see a little bit of it. He's like, no, that's actually the whole movie to fit it on. I was like, oh, like if you go in the theater, that's actually what you saw in the theater. I'm like, how cool is that? It's just all kinds of formative, creative importance in my professional creative life, but it was really special. And, getting that call was pretty surreal. I'd actually worked on, one of the ways I got into it was I got a call a few years ago when they were shooting Mandalorian season 2. Mm-hmm. It was a direct, I think it was the episode called The Jedi, which Robert Rodriguez directed. My friend Dave Klein was shooting. Was a cinematographer on that episode.
And he said, Clerks Dave Klein.
The Clerks Dave Klein. Yeah.
Wow.
So he was working on season 2 as their second unit director of photography. Yeah, and they gave him an episode to shoot as the main DP, and that was with Robert Rodriguez, and he had a second unit to shoot, and he says, "Oh, he's like, I need your help." He's like, "I'm in the show. It's The Mandalorian." I was like, "I can't tell you anything about it. Where we're going to be, what it's for, but we're going to be outside on location for the first time on the show that the show's ever done. And I need somebody to come shoot my second unit. Will you do it? Are you around?" I'm like, "To Star Wars?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Done." He's like, "It's not going to be easy. It's like all action and it's how, what? It's fine. Done." It's like, "It's not going to be really," I was like, "Dude, fine. Done. No problem. Tell me when and where." So, and I went and did that for 3 or 4 days with their second unit director, and I got to shoot. Basically, I got to shoot, Boba Fett's character's arrival and fighting stormtroopers, and this epic stormtrooper fight, and it was so much fun because I remember as a kid, I used to make these movies with my friends on the weekends. Yeah, and sometimes we'd pretend like we were Star Wars characters. We'd be up in the hills. And this was in Simi Valley, very close to where I grew up, where I used to actually go up in the hills, like with video cameras and screw around. And now I'm screwing around again with video cameras, nicer video cameras, and better stormtrooper outfits, better costumes, and doing the same kind of just, jumping off of rocks and hiding behind rocks. Yeah. Literally what we would do as kids with video cameras. In stupid little action movies, but now we're doing it, and it's part of Star Wars, so it's pretty funny. So, and then based off that experience, and that went well. And when they were getting ready to put Ahsoka into production, Dave was busy with the new season of Mandalorian 3, which he was one of the main DPs on, and so he wasn't going to be available for Ahsoka. And he very kindly recommended that the producers chat with me, saying like, "Oh, and by the way, like he also did that second unit that everybody was very happy with, that action sequence, and blah blah blah. And you guys should chat with them. I think you might be interested." And they did. And I went through the longest series of interviews I've ever had with various people, and culminating with Dave Filoni. And I don't know.
You bullshitted your way in, and then they believed you.
I was like, I just kept saying like, "I'm a big fan." I don't know. in my blood, and, but no, I mean, like I did speak about, I mean, there's the conversations you have with the producers, which are different than the kind of creative conversations you have with the creator and director. But yeah, I mean, it's like it all came from the heart. And I assume my enthusiasm was obvious. And, but in like a way that I could actually, not just as a fan, but in a contributing way.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, great. You start, in like a few weeks, and you're going to be on the job for the next 14 months. And it's just like, oh my God, wow.
Still cool. And
yeah.
Well, and I think that's the magic trick of this particular series. It's exactly what you're just talking about, where it's this element of reverence, but taking the story further, where it is something that's not simply fan service and here's the greatest hits of all the things that you wanted to see spun out from Rebels. It's something that actually does live on its own, and something that I think you can come into this without all of the fan service nods that are here and still there's a really strong core story at the center of this. But then there's also those things for a kid that grew up on these Star Wars movies, and I'm seeing that opening sequence with Ray Stevenson walking down, and it's just so badass. It's so appropriate, and it just made me so happy and sad at the same time seeing that moment of just the way that it's being shot and recreating these elements that I'd seen in other Star Wars films. But did you need to see those to appreciate it? I don't think so, because the point is just establishing the threat through the way this is being shot and the way this is being presented and showing. And, there's a mirror with Ahsoka and showing these are the two sides that you'll be dealing with here. But if you have any prior engagement with this material, it really is just paying off dividends.
I'm really glad you mentioned the hallway with Ray, because there's a fun little story about that.
Yeah.
For fans of the A New Hope. So that hallway scene, there's a part of something I've always been fascinated with, and I don't know why, but in A New Hope, when the hallway scene in the blockade runner, when Vader comes through and there's the blaster fight, I was always obsessed with like the smoke, and like every time a blaster hit the wall, there was like this beautiful billowing smoke that they would go up and like float along the ceiling, and you see some wide shots, and there's like this smoke just kind of hovering and floating above the ceiling, like softening the lights. And I always thought that was like the coolest effect that you never really saw. So I see that we have a similar type of hallway, and I say to Dave, I said, hey, there's something I really would like to try that I've always kind of been obsessed with. He goes, uh-huh. And I said, the smoke in the hallway from episode 4. And he goes, okay. And I go, no. You know how the blasters hit the wall and there's all this beautiful billowing smoke and then it's floating on the ceiling? He goes, yeah. And I said, I want to do that. He goes, okay. It's crazy. So I said, can I talk to the effects guys? He goes, sure. So I went into this R&D process with the effects team, special effects team, about how we were going to do this, and the fact that I wanted to do it practically, because a lot of that stuff that we do in the show is actually digital, for safety and just for speed and all that. But I said, I really want to do this real because I really want to try to get those billowing blaster things. I think that's a something that's identifiable of that scene in the first movie, that without those kind of very smoky, thick, billowing effects, it'll feel a little stale, and it gives it a little bit of energy. There's some movement. It changes the light. It's really fun. And people are going through the smoke, whatever. And he's like, all right. So I talked to them, and we had this R&D period where we're trying to figure out how to get smoke that would stay clumped together and go to the ceiling and float there. And then it turned out that through some research that we couldn't do that, because the way they did it back in England in the mid to late 70s was very toxic. They used pyrotechnics that actually were noxious, toxic.
Oh my God.
In order to get those effects in enclosed areas. And we can't do that.
Of course.
So with all my heartbreak, I said, okay, well, like, what's the best way to try to figure out how to do that? And I think we figured out a way that somehow references that. So when you watch that again, just know that there was a lot of effort and time put into making the smoke in that hallway look like the smoke in the hallway from episode 4.
There's a lot of interesting details that are here in the background, these small little things, the way that there's imperfections in the lighting, that you'll have a wall that has multiple light sources on it and they're not all pointed in the exact same direction, where it's a digital effect where it's mirrored the same things. There's these differences in it and it gives it a natural feeling. And I think I have a pretty decent eye for picking up stagecraft versus real stagecraft and seeing where that line is. It got pretty blurry in this one for me, where I was having some definite trouble picking up things. And when you were talking about smoke, I was thinking about when you have the ruins of this ancient temple, and when you go back to it and you have the smoke rolling through that, and it's that line for me it's almost gone at this point.
Yeah.
Some of those moments.
What's really interesting is that a lot of comments I've seen on the first 2 episodes talking about blue screen, like set blue screen, volume, virtual sets, most of them have been wrong. They are completely wrong with what they think is virtual versus blue screen versus like all set. So that's really interesting. And I don't want to say
you don't have to give it away
because I'm not going to give it away, but like it's very interesting. Sometimes heartbreaking because they're like, that's the worst looking volume stuff I've ever seen. And you're like, that was actually shot outside in a parking lot against a blue screen. But okay. But like, honestly, it doesn't matter. It's just kind of amusing to me to see how it's more about what people are responding to and how are they responding to the shot and the comp of the visual effects. Because even the stuff on LED screens is still ends up being fine-tuned and finessed in post a little bit. It's rarely untouched. It's not like we shoot it, it's in camera, and then it never gets touched again. We still tweak it a little bit, but there's some, and I think like there's some really good overall very successful stuff in the volume. I think the blue screen stuff is very successful, and it actually gets, because we shot most of the episode. Well, more or less the whole show is shot in order.
Oh, really?
Like we start with it's broken up in sections, but we generally would start with episode 1, and then episode 1 and kind of 2 would be shot at the same time and overlap a little bit. And then you get into like the next block, and then 2 bleeds into 3, and then 3 and 2 are being shot at the same time. And then like 2 ends, and then 3, 4, and 5 are being shot at the same.
Interesting.
So we start doing they start overlapping more and more, but it's really scheduled around sets.
That's so funny, because normally you would use sets and then just close the set. So you'd say, okay, we're using episode 7, 1, and 3 today because we have this set for it, and then we can move on, or something similar to that. And that can be. I think because of the journey of our story, it was important that we have some sort of shooting in order had some relevance and importance. The next thing after that was set order. When the volume was available, or certain sets were available on certain stages, and then it was scheduled around that. But always trying to do that within the episodes or within a couple episodes. So, the actors and the directors aren't just like completely crisscrossing and out of whack, because, in a show with as much journey as ours takes, you've got to like kind of keep everybody's head on straight. Makes sense. And, the idea of trying to pinpoint the differences, it's just, if that's what you're focused on, you're not watching the show and enjoying it. Yeah. And so that's that's something that I hope casual viewers aren't doing. That's something more of I'm watching this for the second time. The first time, whenever I watch something, I'm always going to try to give something a pass where it's just simply entertainment value. I'm not putting any level of criticism on it. I just want to sit back and let it do its thing and see how I respond to it. And then maybe try to start breaking it apart a little bit and think about how it's working and why it's working and what these things are. And even then, there were certain moments here where the speeder bike thing, the 8-year-old in me, my heart was so happy to see that. And it was something that I didn't know that I needed, because you describe it on paper and it's something that I wouldn't respond to normally. But the idea that there's this needle drop with the speeder bike in this background. I was all in. It's just, no, I just want to accept this exactly where it is instead of pushing back and try to see where the magic trick is.
Yeah. And that was also an interesting thing. I mean, that scene was, one of the first conversations was, Eric, we feel like we can improve speeder bike scenes. We've been generally very happy with the speeder bike scenes that we've had in the other series. We would like to take it further and figure out how to do that. We'd like to make it look better, be more dynamic, feel like we're more there, feel like less digital, all that. So, like, how would you do it? And, being the newbie to this and not having any preconceived or knowing how they've ever done it, I'm like, oh, it's great. Well, if I had it my way, I would put, the speeder bike prop on the flatbed of a truck and drive it down the freeway and shoot it from another car, and that's how I would do it. Obviously, we can't do that. But that's what I think would look the best, because there would be shake. We'd be trying to keep up with it. The camera would be trying to keep pace. Because you're always I thought about when I shoot, at the commercials, like car commercials, and you're always trying to keep pace and you're always speeding up and slowing down and in a formation, and the camera has a little bit of bump and a little bit of jiggle to it and whatever. And that to me is always really sold movement and motion, and not made it feel like it's somebody static with a fan in front of them blowing their hair. And and then you put it on a moving background and it just doesn't always blend super well. Sometimes it works great, but for me, it was less about that, but more about what are you doing with the camera? The camera's got to be the convincing factor. So we just decided, or I said, we should put it on on a base that moves. It wasn't me. It was a conversation amongst a lot of people. Our conversation was let's put it on. Let's see what we can do by putting on a moving base. And then my contribution was, I'm going to put the camera on a crane and a remote controlled head that the camera sits on, but I want to pretend that crane is on another vehicle, like another speeder bike or something next to it, and I want to buffet the camera with air and wind, or even have somebody shake it. And what we ended up doing is having a device that the camera operator would wear on their shoulder that had motion sensors in it that would then mimic take their motion. So basically to put a handheld device on the shoulder and translate those handheld movements into the camera. Whereas normally that is trying to keep the camera steady.
Right.
Instead of getting inputs from very steady hands, you're getting an input from basically a box sitting on somebody's shoulder that's translating all those little movements on a shoulder to the camera. So when we're operating the camera, you're basically doing a handheld look on the camera as on this moving crane arm that's moving around the speeder bike that's also getting buffeted by the wind. And the speeder bike's also moving independently. So you have all these independent motions, and everybody's trying to, nobody's communicating, right? Everybody's just trying to follow what the other's doing. So there's always a little bit of a delay. So everybody's responding. Each person's responding to what the other one's doing. And you get these kind of contradictory, but also similar movements that kind of come and go. And I think that was how that ended up, being created and looking like it did. And I think added a nice bit of energy to it, I think it really feels, and then a little bit of interactive light. And we shot that outside, so you got real sun in an environment that's supposed to be real sun, and moving light and moving camera, real wind. So I think that helped with, kind of elevating that speeder bike going down the freeway.
I loved that sequence. It honestly felt like the opening of Akira in a way, where it had that, when the bike drop and everything, and it had that energy to it. It was so cool to see that in a live action form. And I thought it was beautiful. I think it was
really fun. Yeah. I think that came out really well. I was really happy with the final result on that. I mean, everything, but that in particular worked really well. It was fun to see.
And it's in the end, though, it's something that it does all service the narrative. You have these things that are fun along the way, but it is something that you're learning about each of these characters through these motions. And it feels like that your job is ultimately a storyteller, that you are really deeply involved in the narrative and moving this along through these choices, instead of having something that's for the sake of showing off a new toy or making something that's just cool for the sake of being cool. It does feel like this is something that is deeply rooted in its story.
And I think it has to be. And I think that's what Star Wars is. I think that's what the original movies were. There was no, I mean, look, they had very classically trained and old cinematographers shoot, well, at least the first one, not so much on Empire, but like Gilbert Taylor was very old when they shot, episode 4. And, famously, he and Lucas didn't really get along, but for whatever it came out, like it worked really well. Like it didn't need to be flashy. And I've always taken that approach, and everything I've chosen to do is that it's always about story for me and what can I do to help translate the story, bring the story from the page to the screen. Because if I'm not interested in, and it's probably hurt me at times, but I'm not interested in doing like slick photography or flashy photography for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, I don't need something that exists as a shot. Like that's a great shot. Yeah. Like, we love great shots. Cinematographers love great shots. We love people talking about our great shots. But for me, if it's not in the context of the story, if it only exists as a great shot, I don't care. That I've actually, a lot of the time I'll feel like I've done something wrong, because I'm like, oh, well then I don't want the attention on the shot. If that great shot is great also because of what it's doing for that particular scene or that moment in time of the movie, and like what it's contributing to the movie, great. But if it's just for the sake of good photography, it's just, I want it to blend in. I don't need the attention on me or the photography. It's got to be seamless and it's got to blend. And that's just the movies that I've always loved and responded to do that the best. And then end up also being really great examples of cinematography, but not because the photography itself is so good, but because it represents the story and tells the story and helps, like it creates the vibe of the movie so well that's what the good cinematography is. But like broke, and then like and on the flip side, there's also some really like at its core basic cinematography as far as the photography and technique goes. But people go like, oh my God, this is the best cinematography ever. And you're like, great, I agree, it's very good cinematography, but it's not a technical. The achievement is that the cinematography is perfect for the movie and the story.
Yeah, exactly.
But in itself, it's underexposed. It's fogged. It's even out of focus in some of these movies. Like you'll see in the 70s, like there's movies that the 70s that won, Oscars for best cinematography, like out of focus in certain shows, you're like, but it's so good because it's supporting the movie and doing such a good job of telling the story. It's good cinematography. That's what good cinematography is to me. Which is why, like, when I always had the hardest time when I was getting my career started, they're like, oh, you got to do a montage reel of like your best shots to sell yourself in like a 3-minute montage. Like, I don't want to do a 3-minute montage. Like my shots mean nothing. Like I'm not going to show people, like, it doesn't mean, like, I might think a shot's good because it's doing a great job for that point in a project that I did. But at its own, it means nothing. Like nobody's going to like it because they don't know what the context is. Like I can't, it's like a book writer. Like you give us a sample paragraph. Well, from where? Why? Like that's what the equivalent is of me. And I never was able to do that. I did it once. I hated it, and I never did it again. And what I always did is that I made reels that had scenes, short scenes or excerpts of scenes. Back when we did reels, excerpts of scenes, so people could actually understand why I was making the decisions. They could see the photography in the context of the scene, at least, which was the next best thing for me. And so to your point is a very long-winded way of saying, yes, that's exactly kind of what I'm going for, is that it's gotta be all story-based for me. And but look, yes, it has to be accessible, and there has to be an experience that you're giving, and helping create something that's believable in this world. And like, you gotta believe that the spaceship is like it's lit this way, and there's a certain light from a hologram being on or turning on and off or whatever. There's those things too, but it's still all in service of the story. Always, always, always. Even on Star Wars.
Well, and I think that your experience, and it makes perfect sense to me why you would take this approach to this material. I look at something like Young Adult, and that's literally one of my top 10 movies, I think, of the last 30 years. I adore that movie, and I've seen it at least a dozen times, if not more. And it's one of those ones that, you keep going back and finding more in it. And you think about just the control that's in it. And that final shot of that movie is beautiful, not because of the way that it's lit, not because of the way the camera moves, but because of the way that it perfectly encapsulates this film. And there's just a darkness to it, but it's shot in a way that's so...
I don't even remember the last shot of that movie. What is the last shot of that movie?
It's the kitchen scene in the movie. Today's episode of the Following Films podcast is brought to you by Bookman's. So the last time I went into Bookman's, I went straight over to the movie section, as I often do. And I was so excited because one of my favorite things that happens when I go in there, I'm looking for a movie and I don't know exactly what I want to see, something I've been meaning to see, and there's a blind spot. And when I saw East of Eden, I was super excited because it's a movie I've been wanting to see for years, but for whatever reason, I've just never gotten around to it. So the film adaptation of John Steinbeck's East of Eden, it's a powerful cinematic achievement. I know I'm not the first person to say this, but it absolutely does justice to the novel's what can only be described as profound themes and the complex characters. It's directed by Kazan and features outstanding performances from the whole cast, but mainly here by James Dean as Cal Trask. The film captures the essence of the book while adding its own visual and emotional dimension. The cinematography, which looks absolutely incredible in 4K, captures the rugged beauty of the California landscape. So it sets the stage for this intense family drama that unfolds throughout the film. And the screenplay manages to condense this complex novel that is East of Eden without feeling truncated. It makes this really intricate plot, takes that and then just condenses it down and really only gets the essential elements of it. And all the themes are still intact with love, jealousy, and the struggle between good and evil. That's all there. And it doesn't feel like a lesser than. It feels like a complement to. If you've read East of Eden and haven't seen the film, definitely catch up on it. Highly recommend it. If you've only seen the film and haven't read the book, definitely check out the book as well. It's worth your time. But in the movie, James Dean's portrayal of the troubled Cal, it's nothing short of iconic. It showcases his raw talent and charisma. The supporting cast is also incredible, especially Julie Harris, I think, does an equally compelling job here with just an outstanding performance. And there's a depth and authenticity to these characters that wasn't very common for this time. So it's something pretty remarkable here. East of Eden, it's absolutely a classic that continues to resonate to this day, still holds up. I think that's mainly because of its exploration of human nature and the complexity of family dynamics. It's a timeless masterpiece that deserves a place in the annals of cinematic history. I think it's there. It just took me a long time to catch up with it. This is a must-watch for anyone who appreciates powerful storytelling and exceptional performances. So remember, next time you go to Bookman's, they have your cool covered. Hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
The kitchen scene in the movie
where you see Charlize Theron has had absolutely no character arc, and it's just
right, yeah. Okay, yes.
And so it's basically nothing was learned here. Nothing was this hour and a half that you just spent with these characters. It's just a lot of people got hurt, and everybody is worse off for it, and she learned nothing. Is really what that comes down to. But then you take like this shot with Patton Oswalt and her in the bar, and it's just really beautifully well lit shot, but it's actually playing in opposition to that because it's actually a very unnerving shot. And there's these when it's in the context of it. And so you're kind of playing with that balance of what the scene means and how you're presenting it, and doing that. And it's just, to me, that's my favorite kind of cinematography. So to see that level of work in something like Star Wars just makes sense. Or, I mean, your work with Reitman all along, like something like the Ghostbusters film. I adore that movie. I can't tell you. I'm biased though. I have a 7-year-old who's on the spectrum, and that movie hit me in a way that I was not anticipating that day when we went to the theater, and I just felt him being seen through that movie, and it was just really beautiful.
Oh, that's so nice. So, good. I mean, like, but that's I mean, that's the goal. Is like you got to bring life and relatability and accessibility into these stories to really connect. And I think that was a really smart choice in Ghostbusters to do that, and then actually have her be the hero too, right? It's like that was really cool, and she's in the next one we just finished shooting, but yeah, and a lot of what you're talking about also comes, like, it's not all the cinematography, it's not all me. It's cinematography also happens with the director, in conjunction with the director, and the decisions that we make and how we're doing this in our process. It's just kind of left up to me to execute it. So, I mean, for the ideas, like, as much as I'd love to take all the credit, I can't take all the credit because it is a collaboration. But, for instance, like with Jason, like we've worked so long together, and we're so much of the same mind that I think we just generally have the same thought about how a certain thing should be told or how it should go. And we do sometimes creatively clash on those things, but it's all during the process of working towards the final goal of, like, whatever the best solution is. And then all the directors that I've worked with, have their own versions of that. And sometimes they put focus on that thing in different ways, and in Ahsoka, like, the first episode's Dave Filoni, but the other episodes I did were all different directors.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see, and it's up to me and the other DP to continue that kind of vision with the other directors, particularly in times when their instincts want to push us into a different direction.
Sure.
And in terms of photography and the presentation of everything, and also, and then have us be open-minded to listen and absorb what they're saying, but then try to reformulate it if need be into something that is more along the lines of what, right? Because we're tasked with, like, the directors all change, the actors stay the same, and then the visuals, there's got to be a visual through line, right? So it can't just every episode completely go off on a different path. But you do want it, like, everybody has a different all the directors have different takes, and it's got to, we've got to respect that and explore it, and but also stay within the same frame. So we were tasked with keeping everything kind of in line, and it's an interesting process trying to do that, which I haven't had a lot of experience with because I just haven't done a lot of series work. I've actually only done two, but one other series that was a Marvel show, and it's it. But one on the Marvel show, actually, the challenge there was I had one director for my episodes, but then I had another DP I was working with, and on that show, it was more like making sure the DP and I were constantly in sync, trying to make sure it was a very cohesive visual look. So it can be challenging, but I think if you stick to kind of like what the goal is, for me, there's multiple different ways to get there.
Well, of course, there's a rule book that's set up. Essentially, these are the parameters you need to work within, but there should still be some sense of self-expression through that. You don't want somebody showing up and saying, okay, we're going to suddenly do episode 4 in Academy ratio in black and white. With, it's just,
by the way, super cool. Not Star Wars, but like that would be an interesting pitch.
to,
Guys, hear me out.
I got an
Just
idea.
like Star Wars was, like we all saw Star Wars for the first time on home video and, Academy and Square format on VHS,
Well,
it still works. No. Yeah. But
that's how we fell in love with it.
yeah, it is. But but to that end, like Star Wars, for instance, has always been widescreen.
Yeah.
Star Wars has always been widescreen and it's always been anamorphic.
Yep.
And that's just a visual. That's a tool that has never changed. Actually, I take that back on the prequels. Lucas ended up bailing on anamorphic, but kept widescreen. But the kind of lens he used was not anamorphic. Yeah, he used spherical lenses when he shot the original on those, went digital on those movies. But it's okay. We forgive that. But Star Wars has always been like widescreen anamorphic.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've continued, and that's, I think, really fun. And I think that's like a telltale visual cue of like, what makes Star Wars look like Star Wars, it's been super fun. I don't know what to say. I hope it looks like it's being well received.
Wasn't my house.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, because you never know. I mean, all I can say is that myself and everybody that I came across and worked with on it, everybody loves Star Wars and the IP, all of it in different ways. And people really put a lot into it. I mean, it's not like my story is, everybody on the crew's got a story similar.
Of course.
And everybody remembers the day they were called to work on it. Everybody, works the long hours and the extra hours and puts in 110% because we love it so much. And Dave Filoni is so charming and affable and really inspiring. Everybody wants to give their all to him and what he's created. Because he's not just running the show. It's also like his creation, right? Yeah. He created the character. Like, this is his show, his world. This is his baby. And so the desire to please him has been so great. And I think he's happy with it. And I love the way it's come out. It's was really fun to watch these first 2 episodes. Like, and I have 2 kids too. I watched it with them and they gave me a thumbs up. So,
well, it's not many times that I'm preparing for this that my 13-year-old will walk into the room and actually sit down next to me and watch what I'm watching with me. That it's just he walks by, he's like, "Oh, what are you watching tonight?" And it's usually some whatever indie film from Germany that he has no interest in. And for this one, it's like, "Oh, I'm watching Ahsoka," and he just sits down. He's like, "Okay, I'm into that. So let's check this out."
Yeah, it's a good story. It's like all the Star Wars are. I mean, people can debate whether or not they think it's good Star Wars or, good period. But I mean, it's entertaining and it always sucks people in. Mm-hmm. You were talking about earlier about how people will go and stare and try to figure out, what's real versus a digital background versus a blue screen, whatever. And I kind of get amused by these arguments, not because like, I don't know why people spend so much time and energy doing it, but they're spending time with it. Like, they care enough to look at it and dissect it. Even if it's for the, purpose of, hating it, like, okay, whatever, you're still watching it, hate it as much as you want if you're going to keep watching it. Like, it's like, tell me how bad a job I did. That's fine. But like, people are spending time with it. And that's what I love. And I think one of the purposes, one of the greatest things about movie and cinema is the conversations that they create. Yeah. Is that it can be just a very personal experience that people just keep to themselves and enjoy or forget about, but also the experience of watching something together and having a similar experience, but a separate impression, a unique impression of it, and then debating it and arguing it and, extolling it or criticizing it, in really passionate ways. it's all fine,
Mm.
as long as you just know that, filmmakers, they never want to do anything. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. Like, we all work very long and hard hours, and everyone wants to do a good job. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's fine. But like, I think this is something that works really well and is really entertaining. And I love all the conversations about it. I think it's really fun.
Well,
Yeah.
you actually unlocked something I hadn't thought about in a long time, that the examination of the technical aspects was always a part of Star Wars for me.
Mm-hmm.
Learning about motion control cameras that they invented for the first Star Wars movie, and how they got that undershot and that just iconic opening that is forever etched into all of our brains at this point. And, you couldn't give me enough documentaries about the technical aspects of the making of those films. It's just something that will be endlessly interesting to me. Because it was just these kids in a shed putting these things together. Now it's gotten to a point where it's beyond my understanding, where it's just, and I think a lot of people, they reduce it to that, where it's just this, it was done in a computer. There's no real artistry there, and they don't understand.
They don't get it. Because not only did they accomplish it, they had to invent it. And I think that's something that's lost on a lot of people that go like, oh, that looks like, I've read, not for our project for Ahsoka, but I've read, certain things about some of the other Star Wars series, be like, oh, that scene looks like something that was done for a fan film. It's like, okay, sure, you could say that, but people forget about like what it takes to actually create it in the first place. It's not just the execution. You got to create the idea. You got to create the idea, figure out the approach, how to do it, right? And then hope that the execution is good.
Yeah.
So these guys had to, like, to your point, they had to start a visual effects company. They had to create tools and cameras and equipment that should work based on their ideas, but like, you never really know. And then by the time it's like, that's it. That's all you got. So if it didn't look good, there was no going back.
Yep.
So you had to work, had to look good. I can't imagine being like my age now in a cinema in 77, watching that first shot from New Hope on a screen, because other than like 2001, there was never anything remotely complex or as believable as that stuff was. No. Even now I watch it and I'm just knowing how they did it, I'm in awe. Like, it's not digital. Like, in people that watch the original movies that might be underwhelmed by it, they don't understand what an accomplishment it was.
It's incredible. Go ahead and try to do that with your friends, and get actual film stock and try to recreate that and make that happen.
Get film stock, or
use your iPhone.
Camera,
sure.
Go to your garage, use your iPhone, build some models, show them what you can do, and see. You'll realize like how hard it. Now go back 47, 8 years into a unair conditioned warehouse in the valley and nobody even knows what a computer is. It's like it's crazy, and I honestly, I think that I felt that sense of constant invention and creativity and pushing the envelope of what's possible still exists amongst the people that do Star Wars. ILM was our lead visual effects company on this, and working with their visual effects supervisors and people involved. Like, there's just, and even with the volume now, they're just constantly pushing and pushing and pushing at the forefront of visual effects, but all from a storytelling point of view. And it's so exciting to see and like witness firsthand. And I'm just sitting there, my eyes just open, I can't believe I'm here. Because they're always trying to make things more interesting and better, and suck people in that much more in a way. And it's powerful. And I think that's just from that same spirit that they've probably I'm assuming they've always had. But the demand is the demand for quality and success is really high.
Of course.
Our bar that's been set isn't. People don't treat. I'm going to say people within at least the production of the show. I felt, my impression was that people aren't trying to. The goalpost isn't the other Star Wars series. It's not Mandalorian. It's not Boba Fett. It's not Obi-Wan. it's the movies,
Yeah.
you know, and that's where TV has gone. And that's because it's Star Wars. People have an expectation of movie quality. And you're like, guys, we have a fraction of the budget of a Star Wars movie, and they only have the time, and they're only doing it for 2 hours, and we're doing it for, 7, 8, whatever we're doing, on a fraction of the budget and the same amount of shooting time. Like what we're asked to accomplish is extraordinary.
Absolutely.
But by the way, we're holding ourselves to those same standards. Like, we're not making excuses for it, but like, that's the gig. That's what we have to do.
And you have to understand the audience, as a general rule of thumb, will never, and they shouldn't, see that difference. They shouldn't, they should never say, if it says Star Wars on it, there's a standard that's been set. Unless it's something it's either Star Wars animated, maybe that'll be a slightly different world, or and you're kind of bridging those worlds now, but that's it's the live action films, and that's the standard. But it's just, we're on this unusual precipice right now where I think of, the history of when Steadicam started out, and you look at something like Rocky, and you look at that was actually technically a pretty remarkable film, what was going on in that. And then just a few short years later, you look at like The Shining, and you see what they're doing with Steadicam work in that film, and how quickly it evolved and how incredible it got. Then you look at drone photography when that started. And while say what you will about the film, but you watch something like Ambulance, Michael Bay's last film, and the drone work in that is incredible.
It's insane.
There's what we were talking about, servicing narrative and that before. I can kind of throw that out the window and just watch the spectacle with that one and just be floored by the images.
But if that's what it is, but that's what you're selling.
Yeah, exactly.
That movie, you don't go to see Ambulance because you're like, I can't wait to see this story. You're like, I can't wait to see what Michael Bay does with the cameras and explosions and cars, what he blows up and crashes. That's what you go for.
Yeah.
Nobody goes for that. Like, so, but that's entertaining in its own thing. But like, I don't do that. Like, I don't know how to do that. That's like, I need something from the script to give me direction. I can't do shots for shots' sakes. I just don't know how to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that, because films should be entertaining, all kinds. They just should. And for all different kinds of people, comedies, all of it. I don't get it. I don't get it. I blame Game of Thrones for setting the bar so high though with streaming. Like, suddenly you're watching these things, like the most epic shows, you've like more than most movies, and you're like, oh man, this is what people want. And then they hand you over these Star Wars scripts, and you read them, and you're just like, wow. Like, I thought when I did the pilot to Billions, that was a challenging TV show. And like, now you're like, Star Wars as a series. You're like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? But you figure it out, and it helps that everybody working on it is a fan. So we generally think we know, again, speaking for myself, what is appealing, where you got to focus on, like what's important. And do it the best way you can.
You never know what that's going to be. For me, one of the things I always react to is the out of touch technology. When you have costumes that look, they're straight out of the 70s, and the Sucrets tablets that are on people's shirts, like, those are the little things that I'm so glad that they've kept that intact, that it's these tactile little things that are there that they didn't get rid of that and all the other spectacle. They keep those parts.
Well, yeah, I think there are things that are meaningful to the story and to people. And just because there's more image fidelity, that might make things that you could pass off in the 70s sci-fi environment. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work now. If anything, I think you appreciate those things more now because you're actually more noticeable. Yeah. And you go, what? And you're like, oh, that's cool that they kept it. It's just like, it's a little nod, and I think it's important to have those little nods. Like, nobody's asking. People love it because of what it is. You can't change what it is, whether it's Star Wars or any kind of thing like this, Superman, whatever it is.
Sure.
Batman, people get crazy about when they change the suit, too much, or the car in a way that isn't right. If you start getting too far away from the IP, the original IP that people were exposed to and then fell in love with, I understand people get frustrated or upset, like I get that. I love the original versions of the trilogy,
Yeah, same here.
and he went and then he said he added the digital effects in the re-release that he'd always wanted to do that. He never could afford to. It doesn't, but it's not what I fell in love with,
Sure.
and, some people like it and it's not that I don't like it. It's just, that's not what it was for me,
Yeah.
So, but in much the same way that my kids who are teenagers love the prequels, and that's
Those are their Star Wars
is for them. Like those are the best Star Wars for them. And they're like, oh yeah, the 4, 5, 6, they're good. They're okay. I'm like, they're great. Like, yeah, they're okay. But
they're not wrong though. They're not wrong.
Younger people and the way they respond to those stories and those characters is, it's interesting that sometimes I don't fully grasp or understand, but it's interesting to see, what's important to them. Consequently, they very much like the Ahsoka. So please.
That's good. It's always
that was a good vote of confidence.
Kids can be very humbling.
Ask the kids.
And so it's always nice when they appreciate what you do, because they'll definitely put you in your place.
They will tell me. They'll like, because I'm just dad. They're honest. That's not so. Why are you doing that? You shouldn't. Why'd you do that movie? You didn't need to do that. Oh, okay. But no, I got a thumbs up from them so far. So
I have to. I know we've gone over time here, but I've had this little running thing in my mind. Are you familiar with the movie It Follows?
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Okay. It Follows it's a horror film, and the general conceit of it is that you pass along this curse or whatever you want to call it. This entity is going to start following you, and you can pass it on to a next person by having sex with somebody, and then they'll kill that person. Then they can and so on and so forth. In my mind, I've created this narrative that Up in the Air is a sequel.
I have no idea where this is going, but I love it. Okay. Yeah, good. Continue.
To It Follows. And that's the real reason that George Clooney is this way, flying all around the world, trying to keep this thing at bay that's chasing him from his past. I don't know that it 100% holds up.
It's a good mashup. I'll pitch this to Jason and see what he thinks.
Might be
he's it's good. No, it's good. Interesting take. I like that. That's probably worth the article and discussion.
Probably not. I can just leave it alone, but
that'd be a fun deep dive podcast, like a film podcast, where you should try to do like film mashups, see how the worlds connect.
I have this thing in the back of my mind where there's a film podcast I want to start. Just looking back at the old films of the old canon films, and how would you improve them? Because I think every canon film had a good idea that was executed poorly. And I'm just wondering what would be the good version of one of those films? What would be the good version of Cyborg or Cobra or any of these films that came out? So I feel like there's always a good kernel in there, but that's just my own.
Yeah. I mean, they're fun for discussion, but for me, honestly, like the failures and shortcomings of some of those things are what
make them
so endearing and good. Like you don't want them to be perfect, because the enjoyment of these movies is not that they were perfect. They were entertaining and they made you feel a certain way. Or the entertaining part of it is that it's not good and it's flawed. Like that's what you appreciate, and I think that's really charming.
Could not agree with you more. I'm an unabashed fan of Maximum Overdrive, and the movie's inexcusable. I get that, but I do.
Oh my God. I just showed my sons that maybe a month ago.
You're kidding me.
My youngest son is really into genre and kind of horror, and loves Stephen King, loves reading Stephen King. And I said, what? This is a Stephen King movie you should watch. It's called Maximum Overdrive. It's really cheesy though. I think you'll like it. And we still 10 minutes in, he's like, Dad, what is this? This is beyond. And I'm sitting there laughing and having a great old time. And because of like, just remembering how fun it was for me when I first saw it.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, what is this crap? I was like, no, it's fun. Just keep watching it. And then I left the room, and like 10 minutes later, I heard him like giggling and laughing. I was like,
Yep.
Good. He's like, it's
works.
stupid, but he's like, it's funny. I was like, yeah, that's the way what's supposed to be. It's entertaining.
Did you make it to see that Giancarlo Esposito was in that movie?
I don't know if I remember. I mean, I've seen the movie, but maybe I didn't recognize him.
So yeah, Gus from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is the guy that gets electrocuted by the pinball machine. That's him.
He's the pinball machine guy.
He's the pinball machine guy in it. It's a like 25-year-old version of him.
Or is it pinball or the arcade machine?
Arcade machine. You're right. It wasn't pinball.
Yeah,
it's like video game. Yeah,
with the lame flashing lights behind it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, how funny! I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's kind of I always love going back to movies at this point in time. They're movies that are 40 years old and finding those little nuggets of things that are in there that you had no idea.
And he became a star of Breaking Bad and Star Wars. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. It all came full circle.
You never know where these things begin.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, Eric. I really appreciate
Chris, it was good talking to you. It was really
good to
fun.
meet you, man. All right,
hope we get to do it again sometime.
I hope so too, man. Yeah, please. Take care.
Okay, truly. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Time enough to figure you out. Time enough to write this down. Wish me luck, give me hope. So I fall one more time, and I'll say I can't save you. Fell down into the bathroom. Fade out into the background. Get up and look again. So I voice crack.